The whisper in the silence. You are sitting alone in your car with the engine turned off. The phone in your hand has finally stopped buzzing. You could have answered it. You could have had that difficult conversation right then and there. But you didn't. You let it go to voicemail. You tell yourself that you need more time to prepare, or that you are just too tired to deal with it right now. You walk into a meeting and have a brilliant idea. You feel the impulse to speak up. You lean forward, but then a sudden tightness grips your throat. You lean back. You stay silent. You tell yourself that someone else probably has a better point to make, or that now is not the right time. We tend to think of fear as a dramatic event. We imagine a pounding heart or a scream in the night. We think of it as a monster that chases us down a dark alley. But that is not how fear destroys a human life. The fear that controls you does not scream. It whispers. It is the quiet voice that suggests you should wait until Monday. It is the reasonable thought that tells you to be careful. It is the subtle hesitation that feels like patience. It is a master of disguise. It convinces you that you are being strategic when you are actually hiding. It convinces you that you are being realistic when you are actually shrinking. And before you realize it, years have slipped through your fingers. You look around and see a life built entirely by the things you did not do. You see a reality shaped by the risks you did not take. You are safe. You are comfortable, but you are trapped. This is not about being scared of the dark. This is about the invisible force that dictates your every move from the moment you wake up. It is time to stop listening to the whisper. It is time to understand exactly how fear has been driving the car while you sat in the passenger seat. The anticipation of pain. We often mistake the map for the territory. We mistake the smoke for the fire. And in the landscape of human emotion, we make a fundamental error that defines much of our suffering. We mistake fear for danger. These two things feel identical in the body. When you stand at the edge of a cliff, the sensation in your stomach is visceral. When you are about to walk onto a stage to speak, your heart hammers against your ribs with the same intensity as if you were cornered by a predator. But while the sensations are twins, their sources are worlds apart. Danger is a real, immediate threat to your physical safety. It is the car swerving into your lane. It is the stone falling from the ledge above you. Danger is happening right now, in the present moment. Fear is different. Fear is not about the present. Fear is a projection. It is a story your mind tells you about what might happen next. It is the anticipation of pain, not the pain itself. This is a crucial distinction because it reveals that fear is largely a work of fiction. It is a horror movie projected onto the blank screen of the future. Consider the last time you were truly afraid of a social interaction or a professional failure. You laid awake in bed. You played the scenario over and over in your mind. You imagined the awkward silence. You imagined the rejection. You felt the shame of failure before you even started. Your body reacted as if the event were already taking place. Your cortisol spiked. Your muscles tensed. You lost sleep. You suffered. But here is the truth. The event had not happened. In that moment, you were safe in your bed. The temperature was comfortable. There were no tigers in the room. There was no one shouting at you. The only thing tormenting you was your own ability to predict a negative future. You were suffering from the anticipation of pain, and often, the anticipation is far worse than the reality. The ancient philosophers understood this well. They observed that we suffer more in our imagination than in reality. We pay interest on trouble before it is even due. Sometimes we pay interest on trouble that never even arrives. This is the tragic irony of the human condition. We are the only species capable of visualizing the future with such clarity, and we use this superpower to terrorize ourselves. To understand why we do this, we must look at the machinery of the mind. Your brain is not designed for your happiness. It is designed for your survival. It is an intricate biological prediction machine. Its primary job is to scan the environment, identify potential threats, and keep you alive long enough to pass on your genes. It is a security system that was calibrated in a world of tooth and claw. In that ancient world, the cost of missing a threat was death. If you heard a rustle in the bushes and assumed it was just the wind, but it turned out to be a lion, you were removed from the gene pool. If you assumed it was a lion, ran away, and it turned out to be just the wind, you survived. You lost a few calories running, but you lived. Because of this, your brain evolved to be paranoid. It evolved to treat the unknown as dangerous until proven safe. It operates on a better safe than sorry policy. It creates a false positive. It would rather scare you 100 times when you are safe than let you be comfortable once when you are in danger. This system worked beautifully for our ancestors. It kept them alive in a hostile wilderness. But you do not live in a hostile wilderness. You live in a world of high complexity and relatively low physical danger. The threats you face today are abstract. They are emails, public speaking engagements, career changes, and awkward conversations. The problem is that your brain has not updated its software. It uses the same neural architecture to process social rejection as it does to process a physical attack. When you think about quitting your job to pursue a passion, your brain does not see a career decision. It sees a risk to your resources. It sees exclusion from the tribe. It sees a threat to your survival. So it pulls the fire alarm. It floods your system with adrenaline. It shuts down your digestion. It narrows your focus. It prepares you to fight or flee. But you cannot fight an email. You cannot run away from a mortgage. And so you freeze. You sit in the agitation of unspent energy, paralyzed by a threat that exists only as a probability in your mind. This is the mechanism of the anticipation of pain. The brain takes a potential outcome, vividly simulates the pain associated with it, and then forces you to feel that pain in the present moment as a warning. It is trying to protect you. It is screaming at you to stay back, to stay quiet, to stay safe. It acts like an overprotective guardian who refuses to let a child play outside because they might scrape a knee. The intention is love. The intention is preservation. But the result is a life unlived. The result is a prisoner who locks their own cell door from the inside. When we understand fear as the anticipation of pain, we begin to see the cracks in its armor. We realize that the feeling is not a prophecy. Just because you feel afraid does not mean something bad is about to happen. It simply means your brain is considering the possibility that something bad might happen. It is a hypothesis, not a fact. We allow this anticipation to dictate our boundaries. We draw a circle around the things that feel safe, and we refuse to step outside of it. Every time we approach the edge of that circle, the anticipation spikes. The discomfort rises, and to make the feeling go away, we retreat. We back away from the difficult conversation. We put off the project. We agree to things we do not want to do. We buy relief from the fear in the short term, but we pay for it with our potential in the long term. We trade the vastness of what could be for the narrow comfort of what is. And all the while, the brain pats itself on the back for doing a good job. It thinks it saved you. It thinks, I made you feel afraid, and you stopped so you didn't die. Success. This reinforces the cycle. The more you listen to the fear, the stronger the neural pathway becomes. You teach your brain that the anticipation of pain is a valid reason to stop. You validate the false alarm. Over time, the circle of your life shrinks. The walls close in. You become an expert at avoiding the feeling of fear, but in doing so, you become a novice at living. We must recognize that the sensation of fear is not an indicator of your capability. It is merely a biological response to the unknown. It is the friction of growth. When you lift a heavy weight, your muscles burn. That burning is not a sign that you are dying. It is a sign that you are expanding your capacity. Similarly, when you step toward a dream or a difficult choice, the fear you feel is the psychological equivalent of that muscular burn. It is the tension of stretching your identity. It is the sensation of leaving the known for the unknown. It is uncomfortable. Yes, it is unpleasant. But it is not a stop sign. The anticipation of pain is a mirage. It looks solid from a distance. It looks like a wall of fire. But if you walk toward it, If you keep moving despite the screaming of your ancient instincts, you often find that it is nothing more than mist. The catastrophe you imagined rarely comes to pass. And even if you encounter difficulty, the reality of the struggle is almost always more manageable than the nightmare you constructed in your head. You can handle reality. You are built to handle reality. You have resources and resilience and adaptability for the present moment. What you cannot handle is the infinite weight of 1,000 potential disasters that have not happened yet. That is too heavy for anyone to carry. So we must learn to distinguish the signal from the noise. We must learn to thank the bodyguard for the warning and then step out the door anyway. We must learn to see fear not as a monster, but as a misguided friend who simply doesn't understand that you are strong enough to handle a scraped knee. If you are finding value in this exploration of the human mind and want to continue unraveling the mechanisms that drive your behavior, please consider subscribing. Join us as we move deeper into understanding how these hidden forces shape our daily actions. The overprotective guardian. To understand why you are stuck, we must first stop treating fear as an enemy. We often speak of fear as a villain or a defect in our character, but this is a misunderstanding that keeps us trapped. If you want to dismantle the hold fear has on your life, you must first respect its origin. We need to look at the machinery beneath the surface. We need to meet the overprotective guardian living inside your mind. Imagine for a moment the life of your distant ancestors. Picture a world without walls or laws or guarantees of safety. In that environment, survival was not a given. It was a daily victory. If you heard a rustle in the dry grass, you did not have the luxury of curiosity. You did not pause to analyze the wind or wonder if it was merely a small bird. You ran. You reacted instantly. The cost of being wrong about a predator was death, while the cost of being wrong about the wind was just a few wasted calories. Nature designed a system to prioritize safety above all else. It installed a dedicated alarm system deep within the architecture of your brain. This is the amygdala. It is a small almond-shaped structure that acts as a vigilant sentry. It never sleeps. It never takes a day off. Its only job is to scan every moment of your existence for threat. This is the guardian, and for thousands of years this guardian kept us alive. However, we no longer live in the wild. We have built a world of relative physical safety. We have roofs over our heads and food in the refrigerator. The tigers are gone, but the guardian remains. And because it has no predators to fight, it has turned its attention to a new set of targets. It now scans your emails. It watches your bank account. It analyzes the tone of voice used by your partner. It scrutinizes the silence after you speak in a meeting. The biology has not changed, but the environment has. This mismatch is the source of your anxiety. The brain treats social rejection or financial uncertainty with the same chemical intensity as a physical attack. When you are terrified to speak up or to launch that project or to make that phone call, it is because your internal guardian has misclassified the situation. It sees a risk to your ego and labels it as a risk to your survival. This is why fear feels so physical. It is not just a thought, it is a biological takeover. When the guardian pulls the alarm, it triggers a cascade of hormones that prepares you for violence or escape. Your heart rate spikes to pump blood to your muscles. Your digestion shuts down. Your focus narrows until you can only see the immediate threat. This is the fight or flight response. It is a brilliant mechanism for fighting a wolf, but it is a terrible mechanism for negotiating a salary or resolving a conflict with a spouse. Let us look closely at how this manifests because it is rarely as dramatic as a panic attack. Often it is subtle. It hides behind logic. Consider the fight response. In the modern world, you rarely throw punches. Instead, the fight response evolves into defensiveness. It becomes the sharp remark you make when someone critiques your work. It is the sudden anger that flares up when you feel disrespected. Your brain perceives a threat to your status and tries to fight it off to protect your position in the tribe. Then there is the flight response. This is not running away on foot, this is avoidance. It is seeing a difficult number on your phone and letting it go to voicemail. It is knowing you need to have a hard conversation, but choosing to watch television instead. It is the urge to physically leave the room when things get uncomfortable. The guardian whispers that if you just stay away from the threat, you will be safe. And finally, there is the freeze response. In the wild, playing dead could save you from a predator that relies on movement to hunt. Today, the freeze response looks like paralysis. It is sitting in front of your computer screen for hours, unable to type a single word. It is the feeling of being overwhelmed to the point of inaction. You simply shut down. You scroll through social media, not because you are interested, but because your brain has locked the doors and is waiting for the danger to pass. All of these responses are rooted in one fundamental error. The brain struggles to distinguish between reality and imagination. This is the great trick of fear. Fear is not danger. Danger is real. Danger is a car swerving into your lane. Fear is the anticipation of pain. It is a story you tell yourself about what might happen in the future. Your guardian is an excellent storyteller. It is capable of drafting catastrophic scenarios in milliseconds. It shows you a vivid movie of you failing. It plays the sound of people laughing at you. It simulates the pain of rejection so effectively that your body reacts as if it has already happened. You feel the shame of failure before you have even begun. This is why we say fear is the anticipation of pain. You suffer the consequences of a tragedy that has not occurred. This anticipation creates a powerful addiction to the comfort zone. We often talk about the comfort zone as a place of happiness, but that is rarely true. The comfort zone is not where you are happy. It is simply where you are certain. It is a place of known outcomes. Even if you are miserable in a job or a relationship, the guardian prefers it because it is predictable. The guardian hates the unknown because the unknown contains variables it cannot control, so it conditions you. This is a crucial psychological concept. Conditioning. Every time you feel fear and choose to retreat, you are training your brain. You feel the spike of anxiety about a decision. You decide to wait until tomorrow. Immediately, the anxiety drops. You feel a wave of relief. Your brain takes note of this. It learns that avoidance leads to relief. The next time the fear arises, the urge to retreat will be even stronger because you have rewarded the behavior. You are teaching the guardian that it was right to pull the alarm. This cycle turns the guardian into an overprotective parent. Imagine a parent who never lets their child go outside because they might scrape a knee. That child will be safe from scraped knees, but they will also be weak. They will be undeveloped. They will be terrified of the world. By listening to the whispers of fear, you are allowing yourself to be parented by a primitive part of your brain that does not understand your goals. The guardian does not care about your dreams. It does not care about your potential or your legacy or your happiness. It has a single metric for success, which is survival. If you are breathing today exactly as you were breathing yesterday, then the guardian is satisfied. It views a small life as a successful life because a small life is safe. It views a quiet life as a good life because silence attracts no predators. But you are not here merely to survive. You are here to grow, and growth is inherently unsafe to the primitive mind. Growth requires walking into the unknown. It requires the possibility of failure. It demands that you override the programming that has kept your species alive for eons. We must recognize that the sensation of fear is not a stop sign. It is merely information. It is a notification from your biology telling you that the stakes are high. It is telling you that you are entering new territory. The physical symptoms, the racing heart, and the shallow breath are not evidence of your inability. They are simply energy. They are the body preparing for action. The problem is not the feeling itself, but the interpretation of the feeling. When you understand the psychology behind the emotion, you stop taking it personally. You realize that you are not a coward. You are simply a human being with a functioning survival instinct operating in a complex world. The guardian is doing its job. It is screaming at you to stop. It is begging you to be careful. It is flooding your system with cortisol to make you freeze. But you are the captain of this ship, not the guardian. The amygdala is a passenger. It is a loud and panicked passenger, but it does not have to hold the steering wheel. We must learn to acknowledge its presence without obeying its commands. We must learn to thank the guardian for its concern and then move forward anyway. As we move into the specific ways this control manifests in your daily choices, remember this distinction. The voice telling you to wait is not the voice of wisdom. It is the voice of biology trying to save you from a tiger that does not exist. It is trying to keep you safe. But in the modern world, safe is the most dangerous place you can be. Safe is where dreams die. Safe is where regret grows. We need to step out of the biology and into the psychology of agency. We need to see exactly how this overprotective mechanism is making your decisions for you before you even realize you had a choice. Be the comfort of misery. There is a profound contradiction at the heart of the human experience. We claim to seek happiness. We claim to want freedom and growth and joy. But if you observe human behavior closely, you will notice that we do not actually prioritize these things. Above all else, the human brain prioritizes certainty. We have a deep and ancient hunger to know exactly what is going to happen next. This need for prediction is so strong that given the choice between an uncertain happiness and a certain misery, most of us will choose the misery every single time. This is the comfort of misery. It is the strange gravity that keeps you in situations that you know are destroying you. You stay in a job where you are undervalued, not because you enjoy the suffering, but because you know the suffering. You know exactly how the insults feel. You know the rhythm of the exhaustion. You have mapped out the geography of that particular pain. Leaving that job might lead to something better, but it requires stepping into a void where you cannot predict the outcome. To the primitive parts of your brain, that void feels like death. So you stay. You choose the familiar hell over the unfamiliar heaven. It is important to understand that this is not a character flaw. It is a biological mechanism. Your brain is a prediction engine. It is constantly scanning your environment and trying to simulate the next few moments, or days, or years. When your environment is predictable, your stress levels can actually stabilize, even if that environment is toxic. You know when the argument will happen. You know when the money will run out. You know when the criticism will come. There is a twisted form of safety in this knowledge. The anxiety of the unknown is absent because the worst-case scenario is already happening and you are surviving it. This is why people return to toxic relationships. It is why we procrastinate on our dreams. It is why we refuse to speak up. We have become addicted to the certainty of our current struggle. We have mistaken familiarity for safety. We call this the comfort zone, but that is a deceptive name. It is not comfortable. It is often painful and claustrophobic and deeply unsatisfying. It should be called the known zone. Inside the known zone, you are the master of your own suffering. Outside of it, you are a novice in a new world, and that makes you feel small and vulnerable. Fear is incredibly intelligent in how it keeps you inside this zone. It does not always scream at you to run away. Instead, it disguises itself as logic. This is perhaps the most dangerous aspect of how fear controls your daily life. It recruits your intellect to build a cage of rationalizations. You do not tell yourself that you are too scared to start that business. You tell yourself that the market conditions are not right. You tell yourself that you need to do more research. You tell yourself that you are being responsible by waiting. This is procrastination disguised as preparation. It feels like work. It feels like you are being prudent and careful, but in reality it is just fear wearing a suit. You are reading books and taking courses and analysing data, not because you need more information, but because the act of preparation feels like progress without the risk of failure. As long as you are preparing, you are safe. As long as you are in the planning phase, you cannot be judged. You cannot lose, but you also cannot live. You can spend your entire life in the waiting room of potential. You can endlessly sharpen your tools without ever using them. This is how fear hides behind logic. It convinces you that you are just one piece of information away from being ready. But readiness is a myth. You will never feel fully ready to do something that matters. You will never feel fully ready to leave the security of the known. The feeling of readiness only comes after you have made the jump, not before. Consider the small decisions you make every day. Consider the moments when you say yes, when you desperately want to say no. This is another manifestation of the comfort of misery. You agree to obligations you do not want. You attend events that drain you. You take on work that is not yours to carry. Why do you do this? You do it because the momentary discomfort of asserting your boundaries feels more dangerous than the long-term misery of resentment. You are terrified of the immediate reaction of others. You are afraid of the awkward silence, or the look of disappointment, or the potential conflict. So you choose the slow poison of resentment over the sharp pinch of honesty. You choose to betray yourself rather than disrupt the social equilibrium. This behavior shrinks your life. It is a subtle process. It happens day by day and choice by choice. You stop taking the scenic route because it might make you late. You stop introducing yourself to strangers because they might reject you. You stop sharing your creative work because someone might criticize it. Slowly, the perimeter of your life begins to contract. The walls move in closer. Your world becomes smaller and safer and quieter. You might tell yourself that you are just being realistic. You might say that you are content with a simple life, but there is a difference between simplicity and fear. Simplicity is a choice. Fear is a prison. When you are living in the comfort of misery, you are not truly content. You are merely numb. You have lowered your expectations to meet your reality rather than raising your reality to meet your potential. You have accepted a low-grade unhappiness as the baseline of existence because it feels safe. This state of being has a heavy cost. The cost is not just the external success you might miss out on. The cost is your own identity. When you let fear make your decisions for you over a long period of time, you lose touch with who you actually are. You become a reflection of your fears rather than a reflection of your desires. You become the person who didn't, the person who waited, the person who settled. Regret is a far heavier burden than failure. Failure is sharp and painful, but it heals. It becomes a scar and a story and a lesson. Failure means you tried. It means you engaged with reality. Regret, however, is a ghost. It haunts you. It is the dull ache of what could have been. It is the knowledge that you let the best parts of yourself wither away because you were trying to stay safe. The brain will fight you on this. It will fight to keep you in the misery you know. It creates a chemical feedback loop that reinforces your paralysis. When you think about stepping out of line, your amygdala fires. It floods your system with cortisol and adrenaline. Your heart rate rises. Your palms sweat. Your mind goes blank. This is the fight or flight response triggered not by a tiger in the bushes, but by an email you need to send or a conversation you need to have. If you retreat, the anxiety subsides. Your brain records this as a victory. It says we saw a threat and we avoided it, and now we are safe. This reinforces the behavior. The next time you face a similar situation, the fear response will be even stronger, and the urge to retreat will be even more compelling. You are training yourself to be afraid. You are neurologically conditioning yourself to stay small. Breaking this cycle requires you to understand that your feelings are not facts. Just because you feel afraid does not mean you are in danger. It means you are facing the unknown. It means you are growing. The discomfort you feel when you think about changing your life is not a stop sign. It is a growth pain. It is the sensation of your old self stretching to accommodate a new reality. We often wait for the fear to go away before we act. We wait for confidence to arrive. We think that one day we will wake up and feel brave enough to do what needs to be done. But this is a misunderstanding of how psychology works. Confidence is not a prerequisite for action. Confidence is the result of action. The fear does not leave until after you have done the thing you are afraid of. You have to be willing to be uncomfortable. You have to be willing to tolerate the sensation of anxiety without letting it dictate your behavior. You must learn to sit with the uncertainty. You must learn to look at the open door and feel the terror of the void and walk through it anyway. The comfort of misery is a seductive trap. It offers you a life without surprises. It promises you a tomorrow that looks exactly like today. But deep down, you know that is not enough. You know that you were not made to simply survive the passage of time. You were made to engage with the world. You were made to experience the full spectrum of existence, including the failures and the risks and the triumphs. To leave the known zone is to accept that you might get hurt. You might fail. You might look foolish. But it is also the only way to find out what you are capable of. It is the only way to trade the stale air of certainty for the fresh air of possibility. The walls you have built around yourself are not protecting you. They are only keeping you from your own life. The lie of yes. It starts with a simple question. A colleague asks if you can take on an extra project. A family member asks for a ride you do not have time to give. An acquaintance invites you to a dinner you have absolutely no desire to attend. The answer in your head is immediate. It is a loud and resonant refusal. You know you are tired. You know you are overbooked. You know that agreeing to this will ruin your evening or derail your week. The logic is sound and the decision should be easy. But then something happens in the pause between their question and your answer. A micro moment of panic sets in. Your heart rate spikes just enough to be imperceptible to anyone but you. You look at their face and you imagine the slight frown that might appear if you decline. You imagine the awkward silence that will hang in the air. You imagine them walking away and thinking you are selfish or unhelpful or difficult. So you bury the truth. You force a smile. You nod. You hear your own voice betray you as you say, "Sure, I can do that." Or you hear yourself say that you would love to be there. This is the lie of yes. It is one of the most pervasive ways fear controls your daily life, and yet it is rarely identified as fear. We prefer to call it being nice. We call it being a team player. We call it generosity or obligation or politeness. But if we strip away the social paint, what remains is a structural frame of fear. It is the fear of conflict. It is the fear of rejection. It is the fear that your value as a human being is entirely dependent on how useful you are to other people. When you say yes when you mean no, you are not being kind, you are being dishonest. This is a hard truth to swallow because we have built entire identities around the idea of being the reliable one, the person who always shows up, the one who never lets anyone down. But consider the cost of this reliability. To whom are you reliable? You are reliable to everyone except yourself. This behavior turns your life into a simulation of someone else's desires. You become an actor in a play written by the demands of strangers and peers. You wake up on a Saturday morning dreading the events on your calendar because none of them were your choice. They were choices made by your fear in a moment of weakness 3 weeks ago. Let us look closely at the mechanics of this fear. Why is the word no so terrifying? Why does it feel physically dangerous to utter a single syllable of refusal? Evolutionary psychology suggests that for our ancestors, social cohesion was a matter of survival. To be rejected by the tribe meant death. If you were difficult, if you did not contribute, if you caused friction, you risked being cast out into the wilderness. The modern brain still carries this ancient programming. It treats a disappointed look from a coworker with the same chemical urgency as a predator in the bushes. When you are faced with a request, your amygdala, the threat detection center of your brain, lights up. It predicts pain. It predicts a severance of connection. To soothe this anxiety, your brain offers a quick solution. Just agree, submit, keep the peace. This is not a reasoned decision. It is a reflex. It is a fawn response. We talk about fight or flight, but we often forget the other survival strategies. Freezing is one. Fawning is another. Fawning is the act of merging with the needs of the threat to ensure safety. When you compulsively agree to things you do not want to do, you are fawning. You are making yourself small and accommodating so that you do not have to face the terrifying prospect of standing alone. The insidious part of this fear is how it hides behind logic. As soon as you say yes, your rational brain scrambles to justify the capitulation. You tell yourself it will only take an hour. You tell yourself that they really needed help. You tell yourself that you are building social capital that you can cash in later. These are rationalizations. They are stories you tell yourself to cover up the fact that you are too afraid to set a boundary. The tragedy is that this strategy rarely yields the results you hope for. You think that by saying yes, you are securing the relationship and ensuring that people like you. But resentment is a corrosive substance. When you agree to do something out of fear rather than genuine desire, you bring that resentment with you. You show up, but you are not present. You perform the task, but you do it with a low-level bitterness that radiates off you. The people around you are not stupid. They can sense when a yes is reluctant. They can feel the heaviness of your obligation. Over time, your relationships become transactional and hollow. You feel used, but you are the one handing out the invitation to use you. You are teaching the world that your time has no value. You are teaching them that your boundaries are permeable lines in the sand that can be washed away by the slightest wave of pressure. Furthermore, this fear of saying no dilutes your effectiveness in the world. A person who says yes to everything achieves nothing of significance. Focus requires exclusion. Greatness requires the ability to disappoint people. If you are busy fulfilling the trivial requests of the world, you have no energy left for the vital work that only you can do. Think about the last time you overcommitted. Remember the stress that built up in your chest as the deadline approached. Remember the anger you felt toward the person who asked you, even though they simply asked and you were the one who accepted. That anger is misplaced. It belongs to you. It is anger at your own lack of courage. We also must confront the arrogance inherent in the lie of yes. There is a subtle form of ego at play here. We often believe that if we say no, the world will crumble. We think that we are the only ones capable of solving the problem or hosting the event or finishing the report. This is a delusion born of fear. If you say no, the other person will find someone else. They might be momentarily inconvenienced, but they will survive. The project will get done, the party will happen. By stepping back, you actually create space for others to step up. But fear tells you that you are indispensable because if you are not indispensable, then you might be abandoned. Breaking this cycle requires a fundamental shift in how you view your own worth. You must accept that your time is a finite resource that is rapidly depleting. Every time you say yes to something out of fear, you are saying no to your own life. You are saying no to your health. You are saying no to your family. You are saying no to your peace of mind. The lie of yes is a thief. It steals your hours and your energy and gives you nothing in return but a temporary reprieve from social awkwardness. It is uncomfortable to sit in the tension of a refusal. When you first start saying no, your heart will race. You will feel a strong urge to apologize profusely or to offer a lengthy explanation to soften the blow. You will want to fill the silence with excuses. This is the withdrawal symptom of your addiction to comfort. You must learn to tolerate the sensation of disappointing others. It is not fatal. In fact, it is the only path to genuine respect. People respect those who have boundaries. They respect those who value their own time. When you say no with clarity and kindness, you signal to the world that you are a person of substance. You signal that your yes actually means something. When a chronic people pleaser says yes, it is meaningless because they had no choice. It was a compulsion. But when a person with strong boundaries says yes, it is a gift. It is a deliberate choice to invest time and energy. The fear that drives the lie of yes is the fear of being seen. It is safer to hide behind the mask of the helpful martyr than to stand exposed as a person with individual needs and limits. But that safety is a prison. It keeps your life small. It keeps your interactions superficial. You must begin to pause. When the request comes, do not let the reflex take over. Buy yourself time, break the circuit, create a gap between the stimulus and the response. In that gap, you have the power to choose. You can choose the discomfort of the moment over the resentment of the future. You can choose truth over the easy lie. You can choose to be respected rather than just liked. The fear will whisper that you are making a mistake. It will tell you that you are burning bridges. But as you look back at the wreckage of the time you have lost to the demands of others, you will realize that the only bridge you were burning was the one leading to your own potential. The lie of yes is a defense mechanism that has outlived its usefulness. It is time to retire it. It is time to reclaim the power of the negative. It is time to understand that a refusal is not an act of aggression. It is an act of preservation. It is the wall that protects the garden of your life. Without the wall, nothing can grow, because everything is trampled by the passing foot traffic of the world. Fear wants you to keep the gate open. Courage is simply the strength to close it. Procrastination in a suit. We have arrived at the most sophisticated disguise fear ever wears. It does not look like panic. It does not look like trembling hands or a racing heart. It does not even look like laziness. In fact, it often looks exactly like hard work. We call this procrastination in a suit. This is the specific type of fear that targets high achievers and intelligent minds. It is the fear that hides behind logic, preparation, and research. It is the sensation of running a marathon while standing completely still. Imagine you have a project you care deeply about. Perhaps it is a business you want to start, a book you want to write, or a new fitness regimen you intend to begin. The fear of failure, or perhaps the fear of success, triggers an immediate alarm in the amygdala. But your rational brain is too smart to simply run away. Instead, it offers a compromise. It tells you that you are not running away. You are simply preparing. You spend hours researching the best software to use. You read 5 different books on the theory of the task. You organize your desk. You create a color-coded calendar. You design a logo for a company that does not yet have a single product. You tell yourself that you are building a foundation. You tell yourself that you are being responsible. This feels productive. Or it stimulates the brain's reward centers in the same way that actual work does. You get a hit of dopamine every time you find a new resource or organize a new file, but this is a hallucination of progress. You are not moving forward. You are digging a foxhole. This is the lie of readiness. We convince ourselves that there is a threshold of information we must cross before we can act. We believe that if we just read one more article, listen to one more podcast, or buy one more piece of equipment, the fear will vanish. We think that preparation will eventually eclipse the risk. But the fear does not vanish. It shapeshifts. The more you know, the more you realize how much you do not know. The more you analyze the market, the more threats you identify. Your research, which was supposed to give you confidence, actually feeds your anxiety. It gives your fear high-definition data to use against you. This is where the intellect becomes a weapon turned inward. If you are a smart person, you are excellent at rationalizing your inaction. You can construct a perfect logical argument for why today is not the right day to start. You look at the economy. You look at your energy levels. You look at the competition. You draft a mental dissertation on why waiting is the strategic move. You are not being lazy. You are being paralyzed by your own intelligence. You are overthinking the small decisions to avoid facing the big one. Consider the energy it takes to maintain this state. It is exhausting to hold a pose of readiness without ever moving. It drains your mental battery to constantly negotiate with yourself. You end the day feeling depleted, as if you have fought a war, yet looking back, you cannot point to a single territory you have conquered. This form of fear also masquerades as high standards. We call it perfectionism. Perfectionism is often treated as a humble brag, a positive trait that simply means we care about quality. But in the context of fear, perfectionism is a shield. It is a 20-ton shield that crushes you. Perfectionism creates a binary world where you are either flawless or you are a failure. Since flawless is impossible, failure becomes the only option, and so you do not start. You keep the project in the editing phase forever. As long as it is in the editing phase, it is safe. It cannot be judged. It cannot be rejected. It exists in a state of pure potential. You tell yourself that you are refining your work. You are just polishing the edges. But deep down, you know the truth. You are delaying the moment of exposure. You are terrified of the moment when your idea leaves your head and enters the messy, uncontrollable world. The tragic irony is that while you are perfecting your plan in the safety of your mind, someone else is out there doing it. They are doing it messily. They are making mistakes. Their product is flawed. Their technique is clumsy. They are embarrassing themselves, but they are learning. They are getting real-world feedback while you are getting hypothetical headaches. They are building momentum while you are building a monument to caution. Fear tells you that you need a map before you can enter the woods. It demands that you see the entire path, from the first step to the destination, before you are willing to take that first step. But life does not work that way. The path only reveals itself as you walk it. The headlights of a car only show you the next 200 feet, yet you can drive across the entire country that way. Procrastination in a suit demands to see the destination before turning on the engine. This need for certainty is an addiction. We crave the feeling of safety that comes from predicted outcomes. We want to guarantee that we will not waste our time or look foolish. So we wait. We wait for the conditions to be perfect. We wait for the stars to align. We wait for a feeling of courage that never arrives. Courage is not a feeling that comes before the action. Courage is a feeling that comes after the action. Confidence is the residue of movement. By waiting for confidence to arrive before you start, you are defying the laws of psychology. You are waiting for the fire to give you heat before you put in the wood. The cost of this sophisticated procrastination is immense. It is measured in years. It is measured in the slow erosion of your self-trust. Every time you outline a goal and then bury it under a mountain of research, you teach your brain that your word means nothing. You teach yourself that you are a person who plans, not a person who executes. Eventually, the suit becomes a straitjacket. The logic you use to protect yourself becomes a prison cell. You become an expert in the theory of life, but a novice in the practice of it. You can critique the players on the field with absolute precision, but your own jersey is clean and dry. The safety you are protecting is a mirage. By refusing to risk failure, you are guaranteeing it. The project that never launches fails by default. The conversation that never happens resolves nothing. The potential that is never used turns into regret. Regret is the ultimate result of procrastination in a suit. It is a heavy, dull pain. It is not the sharp sting of trying and failing. It is the chronic ache of never having tried at all. It is the realization that while you were waiting for the perfect moment, time was not waiting for you. We must recognize this disguise for what it is. When you find yourself reading the 10th review of a product you need to buy, that is fear. When you find yourself rewriting the first paragraph of your email for the 5th time, that is fear. When you find yourself needing to clean the entire house before you can sit down to work, that is fear. It is not preparation. It is not diligence. It is the rational mind frantically building walls to keep out the uncertainty of the world. It is a desperate attempt to control the uncontrollable. Breaking free from this requires a shift in how we view value. We must stop valuing the plan and start valuing the attempt. We must be willing to be imperfect in public. We must be willing to start before we are ready, because the truth is, you will never be ready. Readiness is a fantasy. There is only now and there is only action. The suit looks professional. It looks smart. But underneath it, there is a scared child waiting for permission to move. You do not need permission. You do not need more data. You need to step into the fog and trust that you can handle what you find there. The freeze response. We tend to view fear as a high-energy event. We imagine the heart pounding and the legs pumping. We imagine the shout of anger or the sprint for safety. We think of fear as loud and kinetic. But there is a silent partner in this triad of survival instincts. There is a response that does not look like fear to the outside observer. It looks like indifference. It looks like laziness. It looks like giving up. This is the freeze response. It is the moment the gazelle stops running, not because it has escaped, but because it has been caught. It is the moment the mouse goes limp in the jaws of the cat. It is the ultimate biological brake pedal. And while you are likely not facing a lion on the savannah today, the mechanism remains exactly the same when you are staring at an unpaid bill or an unanswered email. To understand the freeze response, you must understand the architecture of your own nervous system. Most of us are familiar with the fight or flight response. This is the mobilization system. It floods you with adrenaline. It sends blood to your muscles. It sharpens your vision. It prepares you to handle a threat by overpowering it or escaping it. But there is a threshold where the brain decides that fighting is impossible and fleeing is futile. When the threat feels too large to overcome and too fast to outrun, the brain shifts gears entirely. It initiates a shutdown. This is not a conscious choice. You do not decide to freeze. It happens to you. It is a primitive defense strategy designed to make you invisible to a predator or to numb you against the pain of inevitable death. In the wild, this plays a very specific role. If an animal plays dead, the predator might lose interest or loosen its grip, providing a split-second opportunity for escape. If escape is not possible, the freeze response releases chemicals that act as an analgesic, so the animal feels less pain during its final moments. This is a brilliant adaptation for the wilderness. It is a terrible adaptation for modern life. In our daily existence, the predators are rarely physical. They are conceptual. The threat is a failing marriage. The threat is a mountain of debt. The threat is a career path that feels like a dead end. These are threats you cannot punch and you cannot physically run away from. So your brain maps these dangers, and perceiving no way out, it pulls the emergency brake. This manifests in ways that are deeply confusing and often shame-inducing. Consider the sensation of the freeze in a social setting. You are in a meeting and someone challenges your work. They are aggressive and loud. You know the answer. You know they are wrong. You have the data in your head. But in that moment, your throat closes. Your mind goes blank. The words that were there a second ago evaporate into a thick fog. You sit there in silence, nodding mutely, while your internal world screams at you to speak. After the meeting ends and the adrenaline wears off, the words come rushing back. You spend the next 3 days replaying the scenario in the shower, thinking of exactly what you should have said. You call yourself a coward. You wonder why you have no backbone. But it was not a lack of courage. It was a biological override. Your amygdala perceived the aggression as a life threat. And since you could not fight the boss and could not run out of the room without losing your livelihood, your body chose the only option left. It froze you in place. This dynamic is even more insidious when we look at procrastination. We discussed earlier how procrastination is often fear in a suit, but specifically, it is often a freeze state. Imagine you have a project due. It is complex and the stakes are high. You sit down at your desk at 9 a.m. with every intention of working. You open the document. You stare at the blinking cursor. And suddenly a wave of exhaustion hits you. It is not a sleepy exhaustion. It is a heavy leaden weight. Your brain feels like it is moving through molasses. You decide to check your phone just for a second to clear your head. 3 hours later, you are still scrolling. You are not relaxing. This is the critical distinction. True relaxation is restorative. When you relax, your nervous system enters a state of safety and recovery. But when you are doom scrolling on the couch, ignoring a deadline, you are not safe. Your heart rate is often elevated. Your muscles are tense. You are in a state of high arousal but zero motion. It is like revving the engine of a car while slamming on the brakes. You are burning fuel, but you are going nowhere. This is the freeze response masquerading as laziness. You are overwhelmed by the size of the task, so your nervous system shuts down your ability to engage with it. You are dissociated. You are numbing out, because the reality of the pressure feels like a predator you cannot escape. The tragedy of the freeze response is the cycle of shame it generates. Because it looks like inactivity, we judge ourselves for it. We think we are undisciplined. We look at the pile of unopened mail and think we are just messy or irresponsible. We do not realize that every time we look at that pile, our body is registering a threat and initiating a micro-freeze. We must also talk about the functional freeze. This is a state where you are technically moving, but emotionally you are comatose. You get up, you go to work, you smile at the cashier, you cook dinner, you watch television, you go to sleep, but you feel nothing. The colours of the world have turned grey. You're on autopilot. This happens when we live in a constant state of low-grade fear. Perhaps you are in a relationship where you have to walk on eggshells, constantly monitoring the mood of your partner. You cannot fight them every day, and you cannot leave yet. So you enter a functional freeze. You detach from your own needs. You detach from your own joy. You become a ghost in your own life. It is a survival strategy to minimize conflict, but the cost is your aliveness. The freeze response disconnects us from our bodies. To thaw out, we often have to reconnect with the physical world in very tangible ways, but before we can do that, we must stop demonizing the ice. When you find yourself stuck, unable to start the task, or unable to speak up, you must recognize what is happening. You are not broken. You are not lazy. You are a biological organism reacting to a perceived threat. Your body is trying to save you the only way it knows how. The problem is that the brain is miscalculating the danger. The email is not a tiger. The awkward conversation is not a cliff edge. The freeze response, which was designed to last for minutes in the wild, can last for years in modern society. We can spend decades in a state of suspended animation, waiting for the predator to leave, waiting for the signal that it is safe to move again. But in the modern world, that signal never comes from the outside. The predator is the unmade decision. The predator is the unpursued dream. And because these threats live inside our minds, they will never walk away on their own. Staying frozen feels safer than moving. It feels like a holding pattern. We tell ourselves we are waiting for the right moment. We are waiting for motivation. We are waiting for confidence. But we are actually just playing dead, hoping the challenge will lose interest in us. It will not. The cost of this response is high. While the fight response might leave you with bruises, and the flight response might leave you exhausted, the freeze response leaves you with regret. It steals time. It is the thief that takes years of your life not by destroying them, but by pausing them. You look up and realize 5 years have passed in a job you hate. 10 years have passed in a city you wanted to leave. You have been waiting for the fear to subside so you can move. But the immobility itself creates more fear. It confirms to your brain that you are helpless. Understanding the freeze response is the first step in shattering the ice. It shifts the narrative from I am weak to I am overwhelmed. It moves the problem from a character flaw to a physiological state. And physiological states can be managed. They can be altered. The ice does not have to be your permanent residence. It is simply a signal that your system is overloaded. Recognizing that you are frozen is the first vibration of movement. It is the first crack in the glacier. And as we will see in the coming chapters, once you understand the cost of remaining still, the desire to move becomes stronger than the instinct to hide. The shrinking world. Imagine a map of the world. Now imagine a map of your life. When you were a child, the borders of this map were fluid. They were defined only by how far your legs could carry you or how late you were allowed to stay outside. The unknown was a place of mystery, but it was also a place of promise. You looked at the horizon and saw potential, but something happens as we age. We encounter pain. We encounter embarrassment. We encounter the sharp edge of failure. And slowly the cartographer in our mind begins to redraw the borders. This is the segment we call the shrinking world. It is perhaps the most tragic aspect of living under the tyranny of fear. It is not a sudden explosion of terror. It is a slow and steady erosion of your territory. Think about how this happens in the practical reality of a Tuesday afternoon. You are invited to a social gathering. It is not a dangerous event. It is simply a room full of people you do not know well. The fear whispers. It suggests that it will be awkward. It reminds you of that one time 3 years ago when you made a clumsy joke and silence fell over the group. It tells you that you are tired. It tells you that it is safer to stay home. So you stay home. This feels like a relief. That is the chemical trick fear plays on you. When you cancel plans or avoid a challenge, your brain releases a wave of relief. You feel safe. You feel comfortable. You sit on your couch and tell yourself that you made a rational choice based on your energy levels. But look at the map. The territory where you feel capable has just shrunk. That venue is now a place you do not go. Those people are now strangers you will never know. A potential conversation that could have led to a new job or a new friendship or a new romance has been erased from the timeline of your life. Do this once and it is negligible. Do this for 10 years and you wake up in a prison cell that you built yourself. The cost of letting fear lead is that your world becomes smaller and smaller until the only place you feel safe is inside your own head. And even there the thoughts are anxious. We often speak about the comfort zone as if it is a warm and lovely place to be. We treat it like a sanctuary. But in reality, a comfort zone that is ruled by fear is a cage. It is a place of stagnation. When you consistently choose the path of least resistance, you are not just avoiding pain. You are avoiding growth. You are avoiding the necessary friction that polices your character and sharpens your identity. Consider the concept of identity shrinkage. This is a psychological phenomenon where your perception of who you are becomes narrower over time. When you face a fear, you add a layer to your identity. You become the person who spoke on stage. You become the person who started the business. You become the person who traveled alone. Even if you fail, you become the person who survived failure. That is a badge of honor. That is texture to your soul. But when you retreat, your identity becomes defined by what you are not. You are the person who does not drive on highways. You are the person who does not like crowds. You are the person who does not take financial risks. You are the person who stays quiet in meetings. You begin to define yourself by your limitations rather than your capacities. You start to use the word "I simply cannot." I cannot do that. That is just not me. But it is not you because you have allowed fear to edit the manuscript of your personality. You have let the editor cut out whole chapters of your character because they seem too risky to print. This is the tragedy of the shrinking world. You lose the sense of your own agency. You begin to believe that life is something that happens to you rather than something you create. You become a spectator in your own existence. The irony is that we do this to avoid suffering. We think that by playing it safe, we are guaranteeing happiness. But safety is not happiness. Safety is merely the absence of immediate threat. A life lived entirely in safety is a life of quiet desperation. It is a grey existence. It is bland. It lacks the vibrant colours of triumph and the dark hues of tragedy that give a life its depth. And then comes the heaviest cost of all: regret. There is a distinct difference between the pain of failure and the pain of regret. Failure is sharp. It hits you hard in the chest. It burns. You try something and it goes wrong and you feel foolish. But that pain is acute. It happens and then it begins to fade. It eventually turns into a scar, and scars are tough skin. They are evidence of a life lived. Regret is different. Regret is chronic. It is a dull ache that settles in the bones and never leaves. It does not scream. It hums. It is the background noise of a Tuesday night when you are lying in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering what would have happened if you had said yes. What would have happened if you had taken that job in the new city? What would have happened if you had told that person you loved them before they moved away? What would have happened if you had published that book? The ghost of the life you did not live haunts you far more than the mistakes of the life you did live. The shrinking world creates a vacuum where these regrets fester. Because you are not filling your time with new challenges and new actions, your mind has nothing to chew on but the past. You replay old scenarios. You fantasize about a future that you are doing nothing to create. This leads to a profound sense of disconnection. You see other people living. You see them taking risks. You see them getting hurt and getting back up. And you feel a strange mix of envy and judgment. You might tell yourself they are reckless. You might tell yourself they are lucky. But deep down you know the truth. They are just brave. And you are watching from behind the glass. The cost is also physical. A life of avoidance is stressful. It sounds contradictory because you are avoiding the things that scare you, so you should be relaxed. But the body knows when it is trapped. The background anxiety of maintaining the walls of your comfort zone takes a toll. You are constantly vigilant, guarding the perimeter of your shrinking life, making sure nothing scary gets in. That requires energy. It is exhausting to be constantly afraid of the world. And let us look at the impact on your relationships. When your world shrinks, it shrinks for the people around you too. If you are a parent, your fear teaches your children that the world is a hostile place. If you are a partner, your fear limits the experiences you can share with the one you love. You become the anchor that holds the ship in the harbour, not the sail that catches the wind. The The saddest reality of the shrinking world is that it is a lie. The safety is an illusion. You can stay in your house and avoid every social interaction and avoid every professional risk, and tragedy can still find you. Illness can still find you. Loss can still find you. You are not actually controlling the chaos of the universe by staying small. You are simply removing your ability to dance with it. You are stripping yourself of the tools you need to handle the chaos when it inevitably arrives. A person who has faced their fears and failed and survived has resilience. They know that if the worst happens, they can handle it. A person who has avoided all risk has no data on their own strength. They do not know if they can survive because they have never tested the hypothesis. So they remain terrified of the unknown because the unknown remains vast and undefeated. This is the state of the shrinking world. A small room, a quiet life, a narrow identity, a heavy heart full of what could have been. It is a high price to pay for the illusion of safety. It is a high price to pay to silence the whisper of fear for just a moment. But here is the good news. The map is not permanent. The borders you have drawn can be erased. The walls you have built are not made of stone. They are made of thoughts. They are made of habits. And habits can be broken. The world is still there waiting for you to step back into it. The potential you had as a child did not disappear. It was just buried under layers of hesitation. Recognizing the cost is the first step. You have to look at your shrinking map and decide that this territory is not enough for you. You have to decide that you are willing to trade the dull ache of regret for the sharp sting of failure. You have to decide that you want your life to be large again. The expansion of your world begins not with a giant leap, but with a single step across the border you drew yesterday. It begins when you realize that the safety you cherish is actually a cage, and you are holding the key. Action before feeling. We have arrived at the pivot point. This is the moment where the diagnosis ends and the cure begins. Throughout the previous chapters, we have examined the anatomy of fear. We have seen how it whispers in the silence and how it masquerades as logic. We have watched it shrink your world until the walls feel like they are closing in. But understanding the mechanism is not enough to dismantle it. You can study the schematics of a prison cell for a lifetime and still remain locked inside. To escape, you must turn the key. And the key is a concept that contradicts almost everything you have been taught about emotional readiness. It is the principle of action before feeling. Most of us operate under a false assumption that dictates the order of our lives. We believe that we must feel a certain way before we can act a certain way. We wait to feel confident before we speak up in a meeting. We wait to feel motivated before we go to the gym. We wait to feel courageous before we have the difficult conversation. We look inside ourselves, searching for a spark or a sign that says we are ready. We check our emotional weather report to see if it is safe to fly. And because fear is the dominant protective mechanism of the brain, the weather report almost always predicts a storm. If you wait until you feel like doing something difficult, you will likely never do it. The feeling of readiness is a mirage. It is a destination that moves further away the longer you stand still. The human brain is not designed to encourage you to do things that are uncomfortable or scary. It is designed to keep you alive and comfortable. At any moment where you face a risk, your brain will flood your system with chemicals designed to make you hesitate. It will offer you 1,000 logical reasons to wait until tomorrow. It will tell you that you are underprepared or that the timing is wrong. This is not a malfunction. It is your biology working exactly as intended. But it is also the trap that keeps you stuck. The solution requires a complete reversal of the equation. You do not think your way into a new way of acting. You act your way into a new way of thinking. This is the biological truth of confidence. Confidence is not a prerequisite for action. Confidence is the result of action. It is the residue left behind after you have done the thing you were afraid to do. You cannot summon confidence from thin air while sitting on your couch. You have to go out and earn it through movement. Consider the mechanics of a cold shower or jumping into a cold lake. You stand at the edge and look at the water. You know it will be a shock to the system. If you stand there and wait for your body to tell you it wants to be cold, you will stand there forever. Your survival instincts will scream at you to step back. The only way to enter the water is to disconnect your actions from your feelings. You have to operate like a machine. You move your legs. You shift your weight. You fall forward. You do not consult your emotions. You override them. Once you hit the water, the shock is immediate. But then a fascinating thing happens. Your body adjusts. The panic subsides. You realize you survived the transition. That realization is the seed of confidence. If you had waited for the fear to vanish before jumping, you would still be dry and you would still be afraid. The fear only vanishes after the jump. This principle applies to every aspect of the shrinking world we discussed earlier. When you need to make a phone call that terrifies you, the fear will not dissipate while you stare at the number. The fear grows with every second of hesitation. It feeds on your delay. The only way to break the loop is to dial the number while your hands are shaking. It is to speak while your voice is trembling. This is where the concept of the disconnect becomes vital. You must learn to view your fear as a separate entity from your executive function. Your fear is a passenger in the car screaming that you are going too fast. It is loud and frantic, but it does not have to be the driver. You can acknowledge the noise without handing over the steering wheel. You can feel terrified and still move forward. These two states are not mutually exclusive. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is the ability to take action while fear is present. The psychological term for this is behavioral activation. It posits that your behavior can change your emotional state. If you act like a confident person, eventually your brain begins to align with your actions. It looks at what you are doing and updates its self-image to match the evidence. If you consistently face things that scare you, your brain eventually stops labeling those things as threats. The alarm bells get quieter. The comfort zone expands, but the action must come first. There is a window of opportunity that opens when you have an impulse to act. It is very short. Some psychologists suggest it lasts only about 5 seconds. If you have the thought to speak up or to introduce yourself or to launch the project, you have a brief moment before your mind intervenes. In those few seconds, you are free. But if you linger, the rationalization begins. Your brain starts listing the dangers. It highlights the potential for embarrassment. It reminds you of past failures. The window closes and the paralysis sets in. To reclaim your life, you must learn to move within that window. You must become a person who moves before they are ready. This feels unnatural at first. It feels reckless. You will feel like an imposter. You will think that everyone can see how scared you are. But the reality is that the external world only sees your actions. They do not see your internal state. If you walk into a room with your head high and speak clearly, it does not matter if your heart is hammering against your ribs. The outcome is the same. You have taken the territory. This approach requires you to tolerate discomfort. It demands that you accept the physical sensations of fear without letting them dictate your choices. A tight chest does not mean you cannot walk. A dry mouth does not mean you cannot speak. These are just physical sensations. They are not stop signs. They are merely indicators that you are pushing against the boundaries of your current identity. When you practice action before feeling, you begin to gather data that contradicts your fears. You send an email and the world does not end. You ask for a raise and you are not fired. You publish your work and people do not mock you. Each time you act and survive, you chip away at the monolith of fear. You prove to your amygdala that its threat assessment was wrong. This is how you retrain your brain. You cannot argue with the amygdala. You can only show it evidence, and the only evidence it accepts is survival after action. This method destroys procrastination. Procrastination is usually just fear disguised as planning. We tell ourselves we are preparing, we are researching, we are getting our ducks in a row. But usually we are just stalling to avoid the pain of doing. When you adopt the rule of action before feeling, you strip away the camouflage. You realize that you do not need more information. You need movement. You recognize that a messy step forward is infinitely better than a perfect step never taken. As you integrate this into your daily life, you will notice a shift in your energy. The heaviness of dread begins to lift. Dread is the weight of tasks undone and fears unfaced. When you get into the habit of immediate action, you stop carrying that weight. You process the fear in real time rather than hoarding it. Your life becomes fluid again. This is not about being reckless or making foolish decisions. It is about recognizing the difference between a physical danger and a psychological barrier. It is about understanding that your feelings are not facts. They are suggestions, and often they are bad suggestions. So the next time you feel the familiar grip of hesitation, do not wait for it to let go. Do not negotiate with it. Do not analyze it. Simply move your body. Pick up the phone. Walk through the door. Raise your hand. Do the thing that frightens you and watch how quickly the ghost of fear dissolves when faced with the reality of action. This is the only way to break the control. You do not think your way out of a prison you built. You walk out, naming the ghost. We often imagine that the defining moments of our lives are loud. We expect a crash of thunder to announce a disaster, or a fanfare of trumpets to signal a victory. But the force that truly directs the course of your history is rarely so dramatic. It is quiet. It is persistent. It is a ghost that haunts the hallways of your mind, invisible until you learn how to look for it. This ghost is fear, but it does not introduce itself as fear. If it did, you would easily dismiss it. Instead, it wears the mask of rationality. It mimics the voice of wisdom. It pretends to be your protector when, in reality, it is your jailer. To understand how to break free, we must first understand what this ghost actually is. It is not a spiritual entity or a mystical force. It is a biological mechanism. Deep within the architecture of your brain sits an ancient alarm system. It was forged in an era when a rustle in the grass meant a predator was approaching. In that world, hesitation was fatal. Anxiety was a survival tool. The human who stopped to ponder the beauty of a tiger did not survive to pass on their genes. The human who ran away at the first sign of danger lived another day. You are the descendant of the anxious. You are the offspring of the fearful. However, we no longer live in that world. The threats we face today are rarely physical. They are social, professional, and psychological. Yet your biology has not caught up to your technology. Your brain cannot distinguish between the threat of a lion and the threat of an awkward conversation. It treats a rejection email with the same chemical severity as a physical attack. When you think about starting a business, or approaching a stranger, or speaking your truth, your body reacts as if you are stepping off a cliff. The heart races, the stomach turns, the muscles tense. This is the ghost pulling the levers of your physiology. This response triggers what psychologists call the freeze response. We are familiar with fight or flight, but in the modern world, we mostly freeze. We do not run away screaming from a difficult email. We simply ignore it. We distract ourselves. We numb the sensation with endless scrolling or mindless entertainment. We stay in the toxic relationship because the unknown is terrifying. We stay in the job we hate because the salary is predictable. This is the freeze. It is a state of suspended animation where your life pauses, but the clock keeps ticking. The most dangerous aspect of this ghost is its ability to rationalize. The rational part of your brain, the neocortex, is a brilliant lawyer. It is hired by your fear to build a case against action. When you feel the impulse to grow, fear triggers the alarm. Then, your logic steps in to explain why you should stop. It tells you that you are not ready yet. It tells you that you need more certification. It tells you that the timing is bad. It calls this procrastination preparation. It calls this cowardice prudence. You convince yourself that you are being smart. You tell yourself that you are analyzing the variables, but you are not analyzing. You are rationalizing a feeling that you are too afraid to acknowledge. You are painting over the bars of your cage and calling it home. This is how the ghost controls you. It hides behind your own intelligence. The cost of listening to this ghost is not immediate disaster. That is the tragedy of it. If fear caused instant ruin, we would learn to ignore it quickly. Instead, the cost is paid in the slow erosion of your potential. It is the death of 1,000 compromises. Every time you say yes when you want to say no, you shrink. Every time you stay silent when you ought to speak, your identity becomes a little more fragile. Over time, your world becomes smaller. You stop taking risks. You stop seeking new experiences. You stick to the familiar routes, the familiar conversations, and the familiar misery. You build a fortress of safety, only to realize you have walled yourself in. This leads to a life defined by regret rather than failure. We are terrified of failure. We see it as a mark of shame. But failure is evidence that you tried. Failure is data. Failure is growth. Regret, on the other hand, is the ghost of what could have been. It is the haunting knowledge that you never found out what you were capable of because you were too busy staying safe. The pain of failure fades with time. The pain of regret tends to sharpen as the years go by. So how do we exorcise this ghost? We do not fight it. You cannot fight a mechanism designed to save your life. Fighting fear only creates more anxiety, because now you are afraid of being afraid. You enter a feedback loop of panic. The solution is not to fight, but to name. You must strip away the disguise. When you feel that resistance, that sudden urge to delay, that tightness in your chest, you must stop, you must take a breath, and you must name the ghost. You simply say to yourself, I am feeling fear right now. This sounds too simple to be effective, but it is profound. When you observe an emotion, you separate yourself from it. You are no longer the fear. You are the observer of the fear. You shift activity from the emotional center of the brain to the executive center. You turn the lights on in the room, and suddenly the monster in the corner is revealed to be a pile of laundry. Do not call it stress. Do not call it pressure. Do not call it realism. Call it fear. Acknowledge its presence without judgment. Say to yourself, my brain is trying to protect me from a danger that does not exist. Thank your brain for the warning, and then dismiss the advice. This practice requires a shift in identity. You must stop waiting for confidence to arrive. We often think that confident people are fearless. This is a lie. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is action in the presence of fear. The brave feel the same knot in the stomach that the coward feels. The difference is that the brave move forward anyway. They carry the ghost with them. You have to decide that your growth is more important than your comfort. You have to fall in love with the discomfort. You have to seek out the situations that make your hands sweat, because that is where your life is hiding. The cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. This is not just a poetic metaphor. It is a psychological truth. The things you are avoiding are the exact coordinates of your potential. Imagine your life 10 years from now. Imagine you continued to listen to the ghost. Imagine you stayed in the safe lane. Imagine the opportunities you missed, the connections you never made, the version of yourself you never met. That image should scare you more than the rejection or the failure you are facing today. Let that greater fear drive you. The ghost will never truly leave. As long as you are alive, as long as you are pushing into the unknown, the biological alarm will sound. That is okay. Let it sound. Let it scream. Let it whisper. But do not let it drive. You are the driver. Fear is just a passenger. It can point out the potholes. It can complain about the speed. But it never gets to touch the steering wheel again. Once you begin to name the ghost, its power begins to evaporate. It relies on shadows and silence to do its work. By dragging it into the light of awareness, you reclaim your authority. You realize that the walls around you were never made of stone. They were made of fog, and you can walk right through them. What would your days look like if you stopped negotiating with your anxiety? What choices would you make if you knew that the feeling of fear was just a sensation and not a stop sign? The life you want is waiting on the other side of that sensation. The only thing standing in your way is a ghost that you have the power to name. Ironing for discomfort. We live in an age of aggressive comfort. We have engineered our lives to eliminate almost every form of friction. If the room is too hot, we touch a thermostat. If we are hungry, food arrives at our door with a few taps on a screen. If we are bored, We have infinite entertainment in our pockets. We have successfully insulated ourselves from the raw edges of existence. On the surface, this looks like progress. It looks like success. But there is a hidden cost to this padded reality. By removing all external struggle, we have atrophied our ability to handle internal struggle. When you never lift a heavy weight, your muscles wither. When you never calculate a math problem without a computer, your cognitive sharpness dulls. And when you never voluntarily face discomfort, your tolerance for fear vanishes. In a life devoid of physical threats, the brain does not stop looking for danger. It simply lowers the threshold for what it considers dangerous. A difficult email becomes a saber-toothed tiger. A slightly awkward conversation feels like a life or death confrontation. Because we have not trained for discomfort, we have become fragile. To break the hold that fear has on your life, you must go to the gym. But I am not talking about lifting iron plates or running on a treadmill, although those things help. I am talking about the gymnasium of the will. You must begin a regimen of voluntary hardship. You must reintroduce friction into your life on purpose, so that when involuntary friction arrives, as it inevitably will, you do not collapse. This is the concept of training for discomfort. It is the practice of looking at the easy path and deliberately choosing the harder one, not because you have to, but because you need to remind your brain that you are in charge. Consider the sensation of a cold shower. It is a trivial example, yet it is profound. You stand there, naked and vulnerable, looking at the faucet. You know that turning that handle will result in a shock. It will be unpleasant. Your brain, the ancient survivor, screams at you to keep the water warm. It offers you logic. It tells you there is no point in suffering. It tells you to start tomorrow. This is the exact same voice that tells you to procrastinate on your dreams or to stay silent in a meeting. It is the voice of preservation. When you turn the handle to cold and step under the water, something fascinating happens. You gasp. Your heart rate spikes. You want to jump out, but you stay. You force your breathing to slow down. You observe the sensation of freezing on your skin, and you realize that you are not dying. You are merely uncomfortable. In that moment, you are rewriting your neural pathways. You are teaching your amygdala that intense sensation does not equal destruction. You are building a callus over your sensitivity to fear. This practice extends far beyond physical sensation. You can train for social discomfort. For many people, the fear of judgment is a paralyzing force. It keeps mouths shut and ideas hidden. You can train against this by seeking out small doses of rejection or awkwardness. You might choose to negotiate the price of a coffee, not to save money, but to feel the tension of the barista saying no. You might choose to sit in a park and do nothing, absolutely nothing, resisting the urge to pull out your phone to look busy. You sit with the feeling of being exposed. You sit with the boredom. You watch the impulse to flee rise up, and you let it pass. Every time you engage in these microdoses of discomfort, you are casting a vote for a new identity. You are proving to yourself that you can endure the feelings you used to run from. Think about the last time you wanted to have a difficult conversation with a partner or a boss. The fear you felt was physical, a tightness in the chest, a dryness in the throat. That physical sensation is what stopped you. You interpreted that feeling as a stop sign. But if you have trained for discomfort, if you have spent your mornings sweating through a workout you didn't want to do, or sitting in silence when you wanted distraction, you recognize the feeling. You treat it not as a red light, but as a physiological response. You say to yourself, I know this feeling. This is just heat. This is just tension. I have carried heavier things than this. The goal of this training is not masochism. We do not seek pain for the sake of pain. We seek the expansion of our comfort zone. When your comfort zone is the size of a pinhead, everything outside of it is terrifying. When you push the boundaries daily, your comfort zone expands to encompass the world. Things that used to ruin your day become manageable annoyances. Crises that would have sent you into a panic become problems to be solved. There is a specific psychology at play here. It is the distinction between pain and suffering. Pain is a signal from the nervous system. Suffering is the story we tell ourselves about that pain. Fear thrives on the story. It tells you that the discomfort will last forever. It tells you that it is unbearable. By voluntarily entering discomfort, you learn the truth. You learn that the shock of the cold water only lasts a minute before the body adapts. You learn that the awkward silence in a conversation eventually breaks. You learn that the hunger pang during a fast comes in waves and then recedes. You learn the impermanence of sensation. Once you understand that discomfort is temporary, fear loses its primary weapon. It can no longer threaten you with the idea of eternal misery. You know that on the other side of the difficult action, there is relief. There is often pride. You must build your own curriculum for this training. It does not need to be extreme. It needs to be consistent. It might mean waking up 30 minutes earlier than necessary to write, battling the heavy gravity of sleep. It might mean taking the stairs instead of the elevator, feeling the burn in your legs and ignoring the desire for ease. It might mean leaving your phone in another room for 3 hours, fighting the phantom itch of digital addiction. These seem like small things. They appear insignificant in the grand scheme of your life, but they are the bricks that build the fortress of your character. A person who cannot say no to a donut will struggle to say no to a toxic relationship. A person who cannot endure 10 minutes of silence will struggle to endure the long, lonely years of building a business. How you do the small things is how you do the big things. The brain is an efficiency machine. It wants to automate your life to save energy. It wants to keep you in the grooves you have already worn. Fear is the guard dog that barks whenever you try to step out of those grooves. By stepping out of them on purpose every single day, you sedate the guard dog. You teach it that new territory is safe. There is a tremendous freedom that comes from this practice. Most people move through life desperately trying to arrange their circumstances to avoid discomfort. They choose the safe job, the safe hobbies, the safe opinions. They shrink to fit within the walls of their anxiety. When you train for discomfort, you stop needing the world to be perfect. You stop needing everyone to agree with you. You stop needing the temperature to be 72 degrees. You carry your stability within you. You become dangerous to fear. Fear looks for a foothold and finds none, because you have already voluntarily exposed yourself to the things it threatens you with. Fear whispers that you might fail, and you answer that you have failed before in practice and survived. Fear whispers that people might laugh, and you answer that you have sat with embarrassment and it did not kill you. Fear whispers that it will be hard, and you answer that you eat hard things for breakfast. This is not about becoming unfeeling. It is about becoming unshakable. It is about reaching a point where your decisions are driven by your values and your logic, not by your avoidance of unpleasant sensations. Start today. Pick one small thing that makes you flinch. One small thing that makes your brain come up with excuses. Do it. Do it specifically because you do not want to do it. Watch the resistance rise. Watch the bargaining. And then move anyway. When you are done, observe how you feel. You will not feel fear. You will feel a quiet, steady strength. You will feel the satisfaction of a creature that is no longer a slave to its own instincts. You are retraining the animal inside you to follow the command of the human. This is how you prepare for the heavy lifting of life. You do not wait for the tragedy to strike to test your strength. You build the strength now, in the quiet moments, in the cold water, in the early mornings, in the difficult choices. You train for discomfort so that when the world demands bravery, you have a reservoir to draw from. You turn the anticipation of pain into a signal to proceed. You turn the whisper of fear into a call to action. The other side of the wall. We have reached the conclusion of this analysis, but this is only the beginning of your actual practice. Most people spend their lives waiting for a day when they will finally feel completely safe. They believe that once the sensation of dread evaporates, they will finally start that business or repair that relationship. But that day never arrives because safety is not the antidote to fear. Action is. True bravery is not the absence of that chemical rush flooding your bloodstream. It is the willingness to walk forward even while your hands are shaking. This is the fundamental shift in identity you have been searching for. You do not need to be fearless to claim your life. You only need to be willing to move. When you finally step across that invisible wall, you will realize that the monster on the other side was merely a shadow cast by your own hesitation. The barrier was never physical. It was simply a decision you had not made yet. So as we close this chapter, ask yourself one final question. If fear was no longer the silent author of your daily choices, what would your life actually look like?